This is the Situation Room with you in the studio this morning. Eric Latif, CT Muga, Wanjiru Gekonyo, and we have a guest from the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, Commissioner John Monyoncho. We'll be introducing him shortly. First, let's hear today's proverb.
If the elders leave you a legacy of a dignified language, you do not abandon it and speak a childish language.
If the elders leave you a legacy of
a dignified language, you do not abandon it and speak a childish language. I see Wanjiru shaking her head. Wanjiru, it's a proverb.
I'm aware it's a proverb.
Yes, and the way proverbs go, their nature, the DNA, is you don't take them too literally.
Even by implication, language is dynamic. It means whichever legacy you're given, you're expected to build upon it.
True.
So
it's the going back to where...
As you build upon it, don't make it childish.
Yes. And as you build upon it, don't dismantle it and reinvent, try and reinvent it when you've already been told, kuna hii hapa. Nasema wachana na hiyo, tuanze upya.
let's not take it too literally. Let's interpret it as, like we were told yesterday by Christina Nyokavi, you can interpret the Constitution, by Priscilla. You interpret the Constitution, in your own way.
Lawyers really confuse me when it comes to that. I genuinely get confused.
Interpretation.
My goodness.
Yes. You can justify.
You find a spirited...
43A is very clear.
Yes.
On what it says. And then the other person says 43A.
Is really genuinely clear. That says something completely opposite. You're wondering, okay.
Exactly.
So this clarity,
let us interpret your proverb as we will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Our guest, Commissioner John Monyoncho, karibu sana to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much.
We are glad to have you in the show.
I'm happy to be here.
This is called a hot seat that you've occupied.
I wasn't warned.
It's a cold morning.
I would have dressed differently.
We just warmed it up for you. You had to adjust to the weather. As you had that proverb, though, what's your interpretation of this particular proverb?
What works, let it stay. Don't change it. That's what I quickly understand. Just what works, work with it. You don't have to bring yours, which you think works, because it may end up having a problem. Yep.
Bas. In fact,
So it's 3 against 1.
all other interpretations.
Oh, no.
3 against 1.
The Supreme Court has
I
given
do agree
clarity.
with
This is the Supreme Court.
But what I'm saying no to...
Mine is the objection.
What
It's
I'm
the
saying no
dissenting
to
view.
is that it isn't 3 against 1. With proverbs, it isn't that. There's no against. It is you've had your say, okay? And you see, the thing about proverbs, even when you get it wrong like you have, it doesn't really matter.
Siti, I'll put it to you this way. I will exercise my dissenting vote on this one.
Yes.
Because of the childish other things.
You dissented,
Yes.
it went to the High Court,
Court.
you dissented, it went to the Court of Appeal, you
You
dissented.
dissented,
The Supreme Court now
has
has told us what is up.
We have a
Case
principle.
closed.
We have a principle in public
Go to the East Africa
litigation.
Court of Justice.
Sometimes
Yes.
you do it to just expand the space and to be heard and to contribute to the growing knowledge.
Yes.
That's a valid
Language
point.
is dynamic, and sometimes this childishness will yield a strong contributory factor. It will mature eventually.
That's
so
true.
don't be too.
No, it's a
Keep-
point. It's a
don't
it's
stay
a
in
point
the
well.
blinkers.
It's a point well made, Wanjiru. I couldn't actually resist the opportunity to just take a small jab at you.
On a
Yes,
Friday.
no, just to pay you for the earlier comment you made about my proverbs on Wednesday. Yeah.
Eric, you're supposed to be protecting me here. Just because the
So
vegetables
now-
did not roast.
So now, shall we talk about the Salaries and Remuneration Commission? On the 17th of June, 2021, the SRC released a statement titled Outcome of the Third Public Sector Remuneration and Benefits Review Cycle. They gave us very, in terms of background, very many things that they've done. And then conclusion is what is usually important. That's why we go for, that's where the story is. Cognizant of the government's financial constraints, the current wage bill ratios, the need to release resources for investment in the strategic priorities of the government to jumpstart the COVID-19 ravaged economy, number one, there will be no review of the basic salary structures, allowances and benefits paid in the public sector for the financial years 21-22 and 22-23. Number two, annual salary notch adjustments in existing salary structures as set or advised by SRC will continue to be applied within budget allocation. Number 3, no additional funding will be provided for implementation of the job evaluation results in those financial years. Number 4, public sector institutions may implement job evaluation results by placing jobs in their rightful job evaluation grading within the existing salary structures and approved budgets. And then number 5, public sector institutions will be required to fully implement the allowances and benefits policy. And finally, SRC will review the situation after 2 fiscal years and be based on the status of the economy, guide on the way forward for the remaining period of the 3rd remuneration and benefits review cycle. Umeelewa your story? Sidi?
Yes. It's actually very simple. What you're being paid, get used to it. It's not going to increase. And it's not just a flash in the pan. It's this year, next year, and the year after that. Yeah. Simply put, yes. But you have to really put it in a language that has weight. You just can't say it the way I've said it.
You're right.
You can't start a statement with, now, for the next 2 years, there's no money.
You give a background. Wajua hii mambo ya mshahara Kenya imekuwa namna hii. Miaka zikienda zikirudi. Na sasa miaka zimekomaa. COVID notwithstanding, unaendelea. Okay? GDP, that you have to throw in things that make people feel this thing was well thought out. GDP.
You're right.
Yes.
You're right. Because before you make this general conclusion, in fact, a lot of work went into just trying to find out what has happened for the last, since 2013, by the way, because the first cycle we had was in 2013, and then the next one was 2017. The first time we did a job evaluation, and many people keep on asking, what is the job evaluation? Job evaluation just helps to ensure that we reach a position where we have equal pay for work of equal value. Just helps us to get there, so that if you are within an institution, there's what we call relative value, not money-wise, but in terms of if you are a deputy CEO, you cannot be doing more than the CEO. You've got to be doing the job of a deputy CEO. Okay? And therefore, the job evaluation is able to categorize and ensure that there is what we call a consistent flow from top all the way down. And then across institutions, just to ensure that an accountant in Ministry of Public Service and Gender and an accountant or an accountant in KenGen should ideally be earning the same, unless they have a different name, but they do different things. If they do the same thing, they should ideally be the same place. They should earn the same amount of money. There shouldn't be a difference. And that's where we are moving to. So we're saying that before we made this decision, of course, we had to do a job evaluation just to confirm that what was done in 2017 has not changed or has changed. And we did communicate to all the stakeholders, ask them to communicate to us. If they know that their roles have actually changed, then they should send them to us. We do our evaluation and probably give them a new grade. Okay. Now, a new grade of necessity does not mean I pay you more, all right? And paying you more does not mean a new grade. Now, that comes to the job evaluation issue. I can talk until...
A new grade does not mean I pay you more.
Talk. We want to hear
it.
Thank you.
New grade, no increase in pay.
If you have a new grade...
And increase in pay also doesn't mean new grade.
You see, what could happen is this, is I may say there is no job evaluation this year, but I'll increase everybody's pay. The grade has not changed.
Yeah.
It means you're still doing the same thing. What you are doing, you're still doing.
So there's no relation between the two.
There is a relation. They are not mutually exclusive, but they're independent. All right? There is a relationship. The relationship is that the higher up you move in the grade, the more you earn.
Yeah.
All right? But the more you earn does not mean that the grade has necessarily gone up.
The other factors that are considered, other than
it's just
the
like
upward
today,
move of the grade.
if we got a pay rise, if you got a pay rise from Standard Group today for the job that you do in the situation room, doesn't necessarily mean that now because you got a pay rise, you become the boss.
Yes, you will still be doing the same job, but we are saying let's look at what let's motivate. Probably that's the word everybody uses. Let's motivate and pay you a 10% increase this year, but that doesn't change what you're doing.
So that essentially the cost of living adjustment, is that what you would call it?
It depends now, because you may want to call it a cost of living, you may want to call it a performance reward, you may want to call it many things. But part and parcel of it, of course, the larger discussion is around the cost of living. You say, well, you see, the last year to now is about 5%. We'll give you 6%. All right, so that can be done. However, if your job changes now from maybe broadcaster to director after you do a job evaluation, definitely your salary will change.
Comes with something.
And that's what I'm saying. The two are related, but they're mutually exclusive. I mean, they're independent, but not mutually exclusive. Yes.
Understood.
Yes. So in the job evaluation, when you see us saying that the public sector here may implement JE results within a budgeted structure, is because you have institutions that can be able to move some jobs, but when you look at their line budget, it can actually absorb. That's why they've been given that permission. They can be able to implement. But there are some, like purely civil service, they don't have that opportunity. But there is what we call the movement within a structure. Like if the starting is 100,000, the finish is 150, you are at 130, you can continue
have
next
some
year, you
20K.
still move into 135 next year or 140 and so forth until you reach the maximum. So for the next 2 years, you just enjoy the movement within the notch and then not any additional pay over and above that.
A question.
Yes, please, ma'am.
All well heard, and of course it's about salaries, and it's always touchy.
Yeah.
And the circular also says the Kenya wage bill is at 8.3% of GDP against the targeted 7.5.
Yes, please.
Are we looking at retrenchments?
Well, not the commission. The commission doesn't even deal with those issues in terms of retrenchments or reduction of pay. We don't deal with that. We just look at we are from a place where, in terms of the setting and in terms of the reviewing, must be within the structures that already exist that we have in government. We must ensure that when institutions are requesting for reviews, whatever is granted must be within certain limits. If you are to quickly look at or ask the question, so by now, suppose we had no SRC from 2012, what would have happened by now? I'm very confident to say that probably our wage bill would be between 25 and 50% higher than it is currently. Because what would happen before is that institutions that are able to negotiate and get into the negotiation table that are stronger would actually be able to get an additional pay. Others that cannot negotiate would get nothing, as it were. So you would find this kind of inequity taking place across the public sector. So when SRC came on board, what it does is that if institution A writes to SRC, say, kindly, we want a pay rise. We'll ask, so where are you now compared to everybody else? All right? If we look at the people at your same level, where are they? If we give you this amount of money, what happens to the union or the CBAs in the union? We have to look at all those factors before we say, okay, fine, you've asked for a 5%, but I think the 3% is what makes sense compared to what's going on in the market, compared to the affordability principle, compared to we are comparing with other institutions of similar nature. We can go ahead. Or we say no, there is no movement.
What then would determine the package which includes the remuneration plus the privileges and benefits that people who work in certain government institutions have, which are infinitely better than others? Let me take a case in point. Central Bank of Kenya. People who work for the Central Bank of Kenya work on very good terms. If I were to take that in comparison with the Paratharam Board of Kenya, okay, or take, Paratharam, that's a bit far-fetched. Let me take Kenyatta National Hospital, okay? Or let me take some other institution. What I'm asking is, how then do you determine these details? What is it about the functions or of these institutions that makes you consider that certain terms and perks and considerations are perhaps better than some of the others?
I think historically what we have seen is that every institution has decided to do what they feel is good for the institution. That is what has happened historically. And that's why when we come to issues of allowances and benefits, you find people pay themselves differently. And they pay themselves for things, either some of them exist, some of them don't even exist. And when the commission comes on board, first of all, as I mentioned, is that employment policies or human resource policies within institutions, they have their own right to do what they need to do. Okay? But when it comes, the coming in of the commission is now to be able to relook at these benefits. Let's look at the benefits, for example. You're looking at Can I mention institutions here? Am I allowed to
Yep.
mention
Yes, by all means.
That's is that what?
Yeah, public.
It's
Okay,
public.
I'm giving an
yes.
example. If you are having a loan benefit, say for Kenya Power, all right, and Kenya Power actually is giving loans to its staff, but then we have another institution which is as Pareto board which can't afford. But this is the same public sector.
Yep.
This is the same state corporation.
Yep.
I mean, it's a state corporation, and the other one is a state corporation, but they're supposed to make money. They're not making money. And then they have also part of their HR that they will give you loans, but they have no money. They can't afford. So how can they give what they can't afford? All right? So you have to keep on looking at the affordability context. Now, the commission, when it comes on board, it says, you know what? If you are in this position, because our role is, first of all, to set. State officers, we have to set. They do not even make a proposal what they're going to get paid. It is the commission that does that. But public sector itself, the rest of the public officers, they can make a proposal. We would like you to pay us this, and we're asking for this, and so forth and so forth. And then we have to consider amongst now the many other factors that we're thinking about to be able to say go ahead or don't go ahead. All right. Now, some of the institutions have got in their own HR manuals what you call remuneration that has not yet consulted the commission.
Yep.
And some of these cases are even gone to court. But we stand by saying this is not an advice that has been given by the commission, and therefore even the court doesn't have authority to say go ahead and pay this benefit or pay this kind of remuneration.
So HR manuals must get approval from the commission.
They need to follow the advice that has been granted by the commission and operate within that advice.
Okay.
Question
Yes.
on the issue of allowances.
Yes.
One of your reports, I'm not sure whether it's this one, indicates that allowances have mushroomed since 1999, apparently from 31 to
Actually, to 247.
247. How is that possible? and what are you doing? The commission came up with the allowances and benefits policy.
Yes, we have.
What's your strategy? Because you're now getting into people's interests. What's your strategy to enforce this? Because allowances are a point of pain for a lot of Kenyans. We had earlier this week that 400B was paid out in allowances over and above the salaries. Kenyans would love to see this culled, but we know there are a lot of interests. So what is your strategy in getting this done as part of this process that we are discussing now?
Thank you very much. There are two categories of allowances. One, there is the house allowance and commuter allowance. That is the largest portion, probably of the 400B that you're talking about. Because house allowance is really a Labor Act issue. We need to be able to pay whoever has employed you should be able to give you some decent housing and also make sure that you get to work. So those are the two, they're called facilitative allowances, all right? Now, there are the other allowances where I am sure if they're brought forth is where they keep on raising issues. When we talk about 247 allowances, if you recall, in the 90s, early 90s, the public service, they had not reviewed salaries for so long. And one of the reasons, of course, they kept on saying structural adjustments. Of course, I think we are basically going back there, all right? Structural adjustments. And therefore, the only thing government decided to do then is to compensate individuals by paying them allowances. And therefore, one of the studies we found out is that there are employees whose take-home pay, allowances are like 100%, all right,
of the
base pay, all right. So if you're earning maybe 50,000, another 50 is allowances, which now that kind of action did not stop. All right, so it continued. Every time you would feel like you need to be able to compensate, you say, why don't we introduce X allowance, and let's get Y allowance. Let's get, can you add responsibility? What about sitting allowances are temporaneous? They're not always. I mean, sitting allowance, fine. Now, members of parliament have a sitting allowance. I mean, the question you may have to ask is, I mean,
They are paid
they're
the
paid
salary.
anyway. Yeah, they're paid anyway. So why do they
their
get
job.
paid?
We will
It's their
discuss
job.
that in
Their job.
detail.
You know,
Let's go into the
just
other
give an example.
allowances.
Just give an example.
Eh.
But therefore, these allowances continue to increase one by one all through this period from the 90s up to now. So when we came on board as a commission, we asked ourselves, really, what type can these allowances be classified or categorized? Because it looks like there are allowances that have got the same name, but they're different names, paid for the same assignment. All right. There's some allowances that are being paid even for the job that you are doing. We need to find out whether there is no double compensation in terms of paying you an allowance and then paying you a salary. All right. And that's how we came up with the policy of allowances and benefits, where we identified that there's some allowances that actually need to be withdrawn. There are some allowances that whose names need to be, we need to have one name. Instead of having commuter, transport, bicycle,
all the
migu,
same
it's the
thing.
same thing. Give it one name. So that when we see in payroll, there is this allowance, we know this is basically a commuter or a transport allowance. There are some of those allowances which need to be enhanced. All right. There are allowances that need to be thought through, especially when you have jobs that are so highly technical that the only comparator you can find is not even within Kenya. The only comparator is maybe international. How do we incentivize then locals to be able to work here, knowing that this job is at an international level? All right. So that's like the allowance that was introduced is called like the market premium, labor premium for whoever is. If you want to get you're working at an institution like probably KCAA, you know, when you think about the kind of work that they do, you are able to say we need to find a way of incentivizing. Now, what's going to happen as we move into this year is that we will be working with the different institutions just to find out what are the allowances that they have. And then we'll be able to go through those allowances. We'll come through each institution because we tell them there's no allowance going to be paid until it is passed. And at least it adds value in terms of what the commission has provided within the policy.
As a taxpayer, the question would be,
Yes.
what are the kind of financial savings that are likely to come out of this process? And is there a timeline? Ama ni policy ya kuongea tu?
The first 6 months, institutions have been given to implement this policy. Let me assure you, apart from allowances that are being paid through the payroll, there are other allowances that are not being used very well, and that's what is mainly being tamed. All right, an allowance like a traveling allowance, for example. All right, it's called the daily subsistence allowance. All right, when you're working out of station. Part of what we have come to find out is that there are institutions that would prefer to work out of office instead of doing what they need to do in the office.
Yeah.
All right. So to the extent that we're saying, no, we need to find out what is this that you must do out that cannot be done in the office. All right. Up to the level is who is going to approve that kind of going out to do this assignment so that we stop or we reduce the what you call daily subsistence allowance. Because if you go out, depending on your level, all right, if you go out at least a week in a month, you can have a salary that's coming from that allowance. And that's what we would like to stop from happening. We want it to be rationalized, and that individuals who are going out there to do work or must go out there, it must be justified. Now, in terms of course, the amounts, I wish I'd come with all my figures in terms of what is spent from, because all those allowances, we have the figures, how much is being spent. But the biggest chunk, as we've said, is basically house allowance and commuter allowance.
Which won't be touched.
Which also cannot be touched. So what you are trying to touch is the others, because what happens in the others, the more wasteful ones, and the more that seem to be favoring others more than others. There's an inequitability in the process. So people who earn more allowances end up with a bigger take home than others in the same position.
So their salary doesn't mean anything.
No, it doesn't mean anything. They are very happy to see.
I hope you're not going to try and equalize so that
no way.
You're bringing down.
Equalizing is not an economic. In fact, that's a terrible economic state. You never do that. In fact, You know, currently we have like 3 salary structures in the counties, right?
Yes.
The former local authorities earn much higher than those who've been recruited by the counties or those who've been
boards.
seconded to the counties.
From the national.
Yes. So now there's always a discussion, and this is what they keep on telling us. You need
To
lift
harmonize.
you need to harmonize.
Yes, and harmonize does not mean bring down.
It's not bringing it down. It's not bringing it down. But I ask you, you've been earning your money. Can I bring down your money because you are under CBA because the former local authorities were under a CBA, and because of the CBA was being reviewed every year.
Yes.
You know, everybody else who was not under CBA was disadvantaged. So now in the counties, when they are merged into one institution, they are much higher than everybody else. So how do you lower down their pay? Okay, if I increase money without productivity, am I making any sense anymore? Also, I'm just paying you for purposes of harmonizing. I would like if we can generate more money so that you're saying we've generated an additional $500 million or $2 billion. Can you please consider, not even give us, can you consider raising? It must be productivity driven. So what is going to happen? They will stay like that.
Kila mtu akae mahali yako.
Let nature take its course. Because it is not fair to reduce your pay.
And it's not
It doesn't make sense to increase your pay.
increase.
Is a mistake that happened. Well, sorry, not a mistake.
Historical.
It's a historical thing that went on, and there is nothing you can do as it is. Allow history or allow the future to also remove it slowly as we get.
So, with you in the room is Eric Latif, Wanjiru Gikonyo, CT Muga, and of course the Commissioner. We're talking about allowances and what then the SRC is doing to see that we reduce that debt in allowances. Explain this sitting allowance, because you've had issues with some of these commissions. So the Teacher Service Commission has its own way of dealing with its employees, the teachers. The Parliamentary Service Commission has its way of dealing with parliamentary staff and members of parliament. The Public Service Commission has its way of dealing with public servants. Now, do the instructions from SRC apply equally across the commissions and even the independent commissions?
Yes, they do. We are the only institution who are mandated to set and review remuneration and benefits for both state officers and public officers, irrespective of the institution you are in. So long as there is something like public office or state office, it is the commission that does that.
And how binding are your recommendations?
They are binding.
Because
according
I
to
assume they are recommendations.
they're not recommendations. It's a binding advice according in the Constitution, Article 259(11). It is binding.
So then it stops being advice. It's an edict.
Yeah?
It's an edict because if it is binding,
Yes.
what you
It's
say.
an advisory directive.
It's a, yes.
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 Language is good.
Yes.
In fact, the CRA had to litigate the same issue because the CRA also issues advisories,
Yes.
like the SRC does, but these have then were being ignored by Parliament
Correct.
and the Treasury.
Correct.
And so they had to get an advisory from the Supreme Court. The idea, I think, behind the advisory is you don't want to shackle the discretion and the dynamic discussion between institutions. The law is living.
Correct.
So you don't want to make things too rigid. But then, of course, when you have impunity or interests on the side of Parliament, they then say, well, it's just an advisory. We'll listen to this one and ignore that one. So it's really affirming to hear you say that, no, it's an advisory, but it's an advisory with the force of a constitutional commission.
But are there
This is the
instances where your advisory is actually discriminatory? So you're allowing some state officers to get some car grants and you're not allowing other state officers to get some car grants.
You've been sent by the MCAs to make this argument.
Heading down that road.
How can we possibly miss an opportunity such as this one?
Yes, we must ask
When
the
we have an
question.
expert in the house.
Let us ask what
Because
is happening.
If you have a politician
Inequitable.
explaining it, we know what happened.
It's inequitable.
Now,
Much as it's the taxpayers' shillings.
It's first of all, it's important that we not even seem, but we actually be perceived to be, be fair.
Yeah.
All right? That is it. And I don't think from our position, ideally, if you are doing the same job, maybe at a different level, the kind of benefits that should be given should be generally commensurate. May not be exactly the same, but should be commensurate. All right? And of course, what has been happening in that direction is just that from 2013, there's continuous discussion on car grants. All right. Right now, what we're working on is we are looking at how do we ensure that this benefit then is able to reach any person who is dealing with them, either the people at the what do you call it, at the ward level, the MCAs, and also ensure that it's also fair for those who are legislating at the national level.
Explain commensurate.
Right.
You use the word commensurate.
I'm at national. I'm getting 3 million. I'm at my ward. I will give you maybe 1 million. But it's not the same, but it's commensurate to the roles that the place that you play.
You have a smaller population.
Yeah.
You represent a smaller population, a smaller
The
revenue
ward
base.
is smaller. Yeah.
So if we were to use the comparison that Eric brought in, some get a car grant, so these guys are going to get a motorbike grant.
Or a car grant for a smaller car.
A
Or a
smaller
tuk-
car.
or a tuk-tuk.
The car will be
million
smaller.
shillings, you buy a smaller
The car will be smaller than the others. Yeah.
Meaning the amount.
So why did the conversation take so long then?
Which one?
This one on MCAs. Since 2013, it's been an ongoing
Since
conversation.
2013, there's been, every time they've been told there's no budget, we have no money.
Kuna madeni.
By
lazima
SRC.
Una
ilipwe.
pesa.
By SRC.
No, SRC is not the one who says there's no money. SRC is told this is like the job evaluation we did. Our own evaluation was to raise 82 billion to compensate, to pay salaries and remuneration, and also to ensure that the job evaluation positions, those who are evaluated in a different level, should be compensated. So we said, this is what we're going to spend.
Yeah.
So, of course, we must go to the coffers and ask them, we need some money. They said, hey, I know this is a good thing you've done, but I think let's really look at how the economy is looking like.
Let's be real.
Let's be
Lazima
real.
yalipwe.
Let's be real.
Can I?
Okay? And that's why I'm saying that SRC does not say that we will not pay. That is the Treasury who says that. As we say, what do we see and what's going on?
Right.
This is what we would like to have. This is how the payments we think should be made. So can we get this money, please, and can it be implemented? All right?
On
Yeah.
the coffers issue,
Yes.
pensions have become unsustainable. Or rather, pensions are growing at a very high rate.
That's true.
And in our work, it's one of the issues that we flagged as putting pressure on the recurrent wage bill because pensions continue to grow.
Yeah.
Then also medical. There seems to be inconsistency. There's a running story about Kemri and, contracting Madison for its medical, being unable to pay. So Kemri officers right now don't have medical cover. We thought that when NHIF was, kind of revamped and there are mandatory payments being made to NHIF, that government was going to move to NHIF, which is cheaper and offering, there's a super package. So pensions and medical, why do these, how are you dealing with that as the SRC?
Your questions are very valid, but I'm not sure I'm the one who can respond to that. See, when it comes to pension, we have a whole pension institution in the Treasury. We advise. There's a small portion for pension where we advise. First of all, is on the pension ought to be reviewed every so often. All right. And if you look at the act that we have on reviewing the pension payments every so regularly, that is the role of the commission. Right now, we are working on how do we ensure that pension benefits are enjoyed the same way in the public sector, because we have got different pension arrangements between or among different institutions. So we are trying to find a way that the contribution of the employer and the employee should generally be around the same ballpark, instead of having some enjoying higher benefits, others have got, they are calculated differently. So we're working on ensuring that we have a law that is benefiting everyone in the public sector in a similar way. But now the issues of medical, the issues that you've raised, actually, we don't handle them, and I wouldn't be capable
Are
in
they not
answering that
part
question.
of the salaries in terms of when you're standardizing the terms and the benefits? Aren't medical part of that? In terms of, isn't your...
Medical is, you see what happens? For state officers, we set everything,
Right.
including medical, everything for state officers.
So what have you said?
For state officers? No, we've
Oh,
set
for state
officers.
officers,
We set
but
for
not
everything.
public officers.
Public officers, they can
Is the
determine, they can
the
decide.
discretion.
Yeah, they can go to NHI if they want. They can go to Madison if they want. They can go wherever they feel
And
they
if
need to
it's,
go.
what if it's much more expensive? Are you saying that SRC is interested in looking at the equity, is it equity issue?
Yes.
And not the sustainability issue?
Oh, we always look at sustainability. I know an issue that came to us to review a certain institution that wanted to obtain an insured medical cover, which was like 30% higher than what everybody else does. Because what we noticed was that when they obtained the first policy, actually they got like a discount. So now that they were in, the institution is saying, now you must give us. We said, no change, please. It stays the same, because even if you look at within the market what we have, or within the public sector, it is way, way above everybody else.
So what you're saying is that institutions can use private medical insurance, public institutions, to the extent that the amount they pay is not in excess of what they pay if they use the NHIF.
That I'm not confident to say that way. I'm not confident to say that. But institutions, like our institutions, we use a private sector. We use a private, the
Service provider.
Private service provider.
And
Right?
the reason I bring
Okay.
this up is because when we sat on the CBEF of Nairobi County, we looked at what the county was asking to spend on private insurance. We were like, you don't have this money. You need to use the NHIF. So should this not be a key issue for the SRC? How will you build up the NHIF if government institutions are then supporting private
Wanjiru, can I
insurance?
ask a question? How do we connect the role of the SRC to what you're asking? I want to understand.
Salaries and
Yes.
salaries and benefits.
Yes.
If the SRC makes recommendations, advisories on salaries and benefits,
Yes.
medical being one.
Yes.
Sustainability is a key aspect. I believe when the SRC was conceived, it was about the total amount, the total number, because the wage bill has doubled in the last 10, 15 years from something like
Actually 10
400B to 800B.
825, right, yeah.
Like you said, if SRC wasn't there, maybe we'd
Maybe
be
at
on
a trillion.
trillion plus.
Yeah.
So that is great. But there's also sustainability, because some of those issues have an implication on taxpayers. They also have an implication of the ability of public officers to continue enjoying the benefit if government can't afford to pay. So medical and the choice of medical is a very important thing. And if SRC hasn't looked at this, I would recommend have a look, because government is saying we want to give, strong
NHIF for universal health
Who's gonna
coverage.
pay for it?
I agree with you,
Who's
Wanjiru.
gonna pay for it?
Wanjiru, I assure you, the first step that we had taken is to deal with these allowances first. Benefits is on the way.
Yeah.
Benefits is on the way. Because we know different institutions are giving different benefits. The question is, why? Because there are institutions that you pay such high premiums and you never get to use them, as you're saying.
Yeah.
There must be a way of ensuring that the Monyoncho, the taxpayer, is also protected. So that's the way we're moving to. There are institutions that have written to us, can you increase our medical? We ask them why. Can you bring us the experience? What experience do you have in terms of the medical bills for us to say, yes, we are willing to actually allow you to be able to get a higher benefit? That's on the way. I want to believe that as part of allowance and benefits, that has been a priority. I mean, allowances and the allowances policy has been a priority, but benefits, we are moving into that immediately. We finish handling what we're dealing with in terms of allowances.
Yeah, I hope you'll also be looking at the pensions, because an analysis by IBP, really pinpointed a bomb, because pensions by their very nature increase.
They keep on
isn't
increasing.
it?
Anytime you do a pay increase, the
Pension goes
up.
up.
Go up.
I mean,
Yeah.
we are hoping and we're hopeful that now that government has introduced the contribution, so it could be a bit more expensive for government into the future.
Right, because
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
project,
yeah.
that amount sits there and has to keep earning,
Yes.
has to keep compounding.
That's true.
Yeah, but I still don't. This issue of pensions, are we saying that those who require to be paid their pension are more than those who are contributing and who are still in the workforce? Is that what we're saying?
In government.
It's government I'm speaking of.
Is it government?
In public sector.
Yes, in public service.
Government just began defined contribution this year. Now, assuming in government we have those 700, 800,000 plus employees. If you remove state corporations, they're not very many. Teachers are 300 and something thousand. Maybe pure public service could be around 110,000. All right? 90% of those have been enjoying pension paid by government. Those who retired are still enjoying. Those who are still there are still enjoying. It's only this year that the introduction of contributing towards the pension began in January. So it means it's a bill that has to be paid.
You see, where I'm a
Taxpayer.
bit confused, when you say pension,
Yes.
my mind goes to NSSF immediately.
Oof.
Okay.
Because
And when it goes there, what happens?
it actually stays there. Because
That may be the problem. That may be the disconnect.
it isn't actually a disconnect. Because NSSF for the longest time was touted, was presented as a pension scheme.
Yeah, but you see that for everybody else. Everybody goes there. Government doesn't pay you pension until you retire. In fact, they have no money for you. The day
Look,
you retire, they look
Until
for
you
it.
retire.
Government is using
NSSF.
private pension.
I understand what you're saying. It is clarity that I am seeking. Because this is not my thinking alone.
So there are two pensions for
Like,
somebody who has retired
medical.
from public service.
You see, there is
There's NSSF that you are contributing to,
Yes, which
and then your
Mandatory.
employer, the government,
Yes.
also pays you a pension.
now pension. Okay, what you need to do, differentiate is that when you say pension, pension means once you retire, I will pay you a salary every month until you die,
Yes.
equivalent to a certain amount, depending on what level you retired
left at.
All right. NSSF, when you retire, they take everything that you've been contributing and give you once and tell you now you can go. This is what you've been saving with us. The 200 shillings per month for the last 30 years.
Plus interest.
It's now plus interest. Here is your 150. Go home. But government will continue paying you
Monthly.
monthly.
I did not
Until
know
you
this.
die.
Yeah. Why should we? Sorry.
Now, you
That's
clever
pension.
people
Sorry.
who are deriding me when I was asking the question. Do you understand why I was asking the question?
You have just lucked in, Water. You had no idea.
Oh, no, I did not
thank
luck
you for
in.
taking us here.
You see,
This is proof your
There's-
proverb. Sometimes it sounds like it's
you-
not
you-
very
you've decided
guided.
that this fight must continue. Okay.
It doesn't sound like a very guided conversation, but look at the benefits it yields.
You see,
And until you came up with this review recently, what you're saying is public servants, government employees were not contributing towards that pension.
They were not contributing towards that pension.
was only
it's
the
not us who
government.
brought it.
Yes.
It has been
It was there.
discussion for a long time. Since I think it must be early 2012, 2013, there's been a discussion. How do we move on to what we call the public service superannuation scheme, which means it's going to be contributory.
Yeah.
Government has not been, the employees have not been contributing. So you get recruited, you just pay your NSSF, but government is saying the day you retire, for the number of years you will live, we will pay
By the
you.
way,
Can I
Lo-
ask,
the local
which
authority
other country pays a
had it.
pension? Which other country pays a pension till the rest of your life?
People,
Hey,
countries
my
pay.
friend.
I thought.
Why do you think the
But
biggest
Am I,
problem
in
in
the,
world
countries
over-
is
am I
pension?
in the wrong line of business?
No,
I
no,
thought,
this
I
is
thought
global.
pensions are paid based on your contribution.
When you go to the private sector, when you retire from the private sector, where you have been contributing,
Private sector.
you can decide that I want you to pay my. You can
Right.
You can stagger your pension until you can say, when I'm 90, please give me everything.
That's
Please, please.
okay.
But you see,
But
the
you see,
government-
that means when I terminate, the only thing I earn on my pension is the interest, because I'm not paid.
Essentially,
You're
yeah.
not contributing
I'm not-
anymore.
Correct,
I'm not
correct.
contributing.
Into the pension
Therefore,
scheme.
that is the point where my
Yes.
contribution to my pension ends.
That is in
I now
private
begin-
sector.
in private sector.
In
So
governments,
government will pay me by mshahara.
when you hear governments talking about they have this issue of pension, it's because you have to keep sustaining the person who worked for you.
So I
Yes.
must strangle
After they
somebody
retire.
to get a job in government for 2 years. Then I'll get a pension till I
No,
die.
yes. Wait.
As we speak,
2
I have an
years to
uncle
retirement.
who's just about to rest. He earns his pension 3,000 bob
Every month.
every month.
And there are teachers who also earn their 2,000 shillings happily.
Every month.
And have been
happy.
doing
No,
so
wait.
for the
Police
longest
You know, when you
officers.
say teacher, at that level, I also feel yes. But is it a percentage of the salary or is it the salary?
It is
Percentage
not
of
the
your
salary,
last
it's a
pay.
percentage. There's a calculation.
There's a
There's a calculation that is given.
Percentage of your last pay.
of your last pay, and that's why you want to retire
As CEO,
at
at
as high
director
at
level.
a high position as possible, because the higher the salary at
Yeah.
retirement, the higher the pension.
You know,
for
the
you.
local
That aside-
authority had something.
Yes.
Lab Trust. They had a pension scheme for the employees. I know this because my father worked for the local authorities. Yes. And it was slightly better.
And they have a lot of money. They are going to
Yeah,
build the tallest
it was
building in Kenya.
infinitely better than what
Instead of paying the pension.
Serikali Kuu offered and what the teachers were offered and so
Yes.
forth.
We are coming to the end of the show. John,
Maliza
thank you
kabisa.
very much for joining us. 1 hour is a short time
Hey,
when
too
you're having
short.
fun.
Very
right?
short.
Too short.
You'll join us again soon
Sure.
to continue this conversation. There are very many other questions, I'm sure, that will be coming from the public, and we'll take callers next time. John Monyoncho is a commissioner with the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. He's been here explaining to us the work that the SRC has been doing, and especially this one when they said, let's first of all freeze any review of basic salary for the next 2 financial years because of very many things that are happening in the country. And then also telling us what they're doing about allowances, what they're doing about benefits, or what you hope to do soon about benefits. Yes?
Thank you.
Asante sana for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Asante
And as you've
sana.
heard from today's proverb by CT, if it ain't broke,
Don't fix it.
don't fix
Don't
it.
fix it.
Yes.
But if it's broke, please. Like the issue of MPs and getting your
It's
pension
broke.
after
It's broke.
that one, please fix. Sijui ati because you served as an MP for 5 years,
And
you get
your
a pension
family.
for the rest of your life.
And for your family, they're trying to bring the
Aye,
wives and the who's as well.
But there's a bit that the commissioner told us very clearly. Each institution has a certain leeway to determine these things. Now, that particular institution that you're referring to has a lot more leeway than very many other
The
institutions.
Parliamentary Service
Oh,
Commission.
yes, they do.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.